Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Ron. It's Sunday morning. Uh, we'll go ahead and get started. And a couple of things. Richard has already asked a question about setting up a timeline as we study this and pull it all together. I'll let Pastor address that in a minute. Uh, the only thing I want to say before I turn this over to him, I have gotten a couple of questions from people, and I have a question myself. However, there is a direction that he's heading, and he wants to kind of keep it on that course. So we as his discussion goes on, a lot of these things will be answered, like prayer, how we approach the scriptures, how we approach family members who may be seeing things a bit differently, and so we all those things will be answered as well. But I'm gonna let him drive the bus right now, and we'll see if we can fit our questions in as at the end here, or as we go along. Okay, Pastor, you would please. I think you heard what Richard's question was. I'll let you address all of that. Thank you. Are you muted?
Of course I was.
Okay.
I I think it was an excellent suggestion to do a timeline, and I'll do it during the course of the week. But right now, what I would like to do is do an overview of yesterday. Yesterday, there were I misspoke about Sylvester and Constantine. I said Sylvester was appointed by Ptolemy, but he wasn't. It was Constantine. It was not. It was Constantine who appointed him. And I actually had put in my head Sylvester Constantine, but that connection was not made as I was talking yesterday. And it's important because Sylvester was considered to be the first vicar of Rome, and a vicar is one who takes the place of another. So when we think about the Pope being the vicar of Rome, it means that he's taking the place of another. And the another, or the other who he's taking place of, is God. That's why he's considered infallible. Now, from yesterday, we started yesterday talking about the Greeks invaded Kemet. And we talked about how they became the dominant force in Kemet, and how the European, the Greek European was placed on the throne of the Pharaoh in Egypt, and he wanted to force the priests to make him a god. And he did not realize that the Pharaoh was not a god that was being worshipped. It was no different than a president or head of state being honored. And as a result of that desire, he ended up finding some priests who would do it after having beheaded the ones who refused. And the priests who did it were at Memphis. And, and they made an image of his face. And in making that image of his face, that image became God. And the name of that image was a contraction between Osiris and Apis. Apis being the bull, which represented strength, and Osiris being the spiritual entity that represented masculine energy. They did a contraction of that name, and it came, and the name is Serapis. And Serapis was the God that was put forth by the Europeans. And during the course of time, there were different conferences that were called councils, rather, the Council of Nicaea, the Council of Ephesus, Constantinople, etc. During the course of these councils, there was an effort to make Serapis a spiritual entity. In other words, taking the spirituality from Osiris and assigning it to Serapis, even though it was an idol. And what he did not realize is that the people in Kemet did not worship idols, neither did they worship men, but he didn't know that. And this Serapis, as what the council meeting, having been assigned the spiritual nature of Osiris, was being accepted by some, but not by the majority of the inhabitants of the Kushite kingdom, which is Kemet. They were not accepted by them, and because they were not accepted, the temples of the priests in Kemet were torn down, and the sacred writings were taken away from them. And at one of the other conferences, there was the effort, at the first conference rather, when they made him spiritual, he became the savior. Ptolemy the first always wanted to be known as the savior. And that is a complex that Europeans have to this day. Everybody they meet who doesn't look like them need to be saved by them. And once the spiritual essence was attributed to him, to this image, then the image became the Messiah. And in the Greek, it was Christos. And so now we have an entity that is the face of the European who sat on the throne in Egypt, that's now being worshipped as a spiritual entity. And not only is it the Savior, but it is now also the Christ. And those who were following Ptolemy and the worship of Serapis became known as Christians. And as we move to the day when to the time period when Rome invaded Egypt and took over from the Greeks, they did not change the image of Serapis. They did not create another god. They continued with Serapis being the god. And at one of the other conferences later on, I think it was about 1,500 years from the time that Ptolemy first sat on the throne. That was a conference that was supposed to have been the Conference of Nicaea, not the second one, but it was held at the Emperor Constantine's castle. And during that period, there was a discussion between the Greeks and the Romans who had set themselves up as priests. The question becomes, why is it that how is it rather, that they were able to do what they did? They employed the efforts of an African named Sylvester. Constantine did, and he bribed Sylvester and instructed him to do his biddings. He bribed him with power. He told Sylvester that he would have power over his people, and whatever he said would be infallible, and it would not be challenged. So Sylvester was the key component of this this council that ended up naming this idol god, this face of Ptolemy, Zeus. And the reason the Romans accepted Zeus as the name to be used for Serapis is because Zeus and Jupiter in Rome were considered the same gods. And they accepted that the name Zeus because they felt like at this junction, one of the discussions was, but he does not have a name. He has a label. He has a title, but he doesn't have a name. And the title was Christos. But the name Zeus was more personable name. And Zeus became known as Jesus. Now that name spoken in English is Jesus. And that's how Serapis, the idol, became known as Jesus. During the same period, they attributed and the Romans did this. They took the essence of Isis and attributed it to the mother that they call the mother of Jesus being Mary. Before 451, there was no mother of God in existence at all. So when they did that, they had completed the course of bringing into existence a deity that looked like them. And that deity was known as Jesus. And if we look at the comparisons we did yesterday, we can see that 3,200 years before Jesus was born, these events in terms of baptism, in terms of what happened when he was 12 years old and not seen until he was 30 and being, at that time, being baptized, of course, by John. We see all of this about Jesus, but 3,200 years before that, this is the same thing that was said of Heru, which was the son of Osiris and Isis. Now, Heru being the son was not S-O-N, it was S-U-N. The bottom line is this: Africans have always been spiritual from the inception of their existence in this earth. And being spiritual means that they have always recognized one being as the creator of everything that is. And the issue with the Europeans and the African was when they invaded Egypt, they didn't know anything about a God. They had no sense of spirituality at all. They knew nothing about spirit. They knew nothing about a God. And when they saw how the community was responding to the Pharaoh, that is the spiritual community rather, that is why they thought that the Pharaoh was being worshiped as a God, because they had no clue of it. And just like they are doing to this day, they decided what God was going to be. They decided how things were going to function in terms of religion. And the reason they did that was not because they wanted to be religious or spiritual. The reason it was done is because Ptolemy I said that they wanted to control the population. And they saw that the population was following the guidance of the priests. And the priests were the ones who made sure that the principles of Maat were taught. And the Pharaoh made sure that they were carried out, maintaining balance, maintaining harmony throughout the kingdom. So, so it was a desire to control the population. This was the first introduction of man-made religion into the earth. And from that introduction came Christianity, came Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, etc. All of these man-made religions stem from that in the first invasion of Greece rather, into Egypt. So to this day, and I want to ask for questions in a moment. To this day, would you make sure your phones are muted, please?
Okay.
2111 111. Make sure your phones are muted.
So what it smell like?
So anyway, what happened is, to this day, is that just like just like Constantine chose Sylvester because he knew that he felt rather that Sylvester could influence the community. Sylvester was unsuccessful in doing it, but what he was successful in doing was every priest who told the truth about what was happening, Constantine wanted them excommunicated from the priesthood, and Sylvester made that happen. That is going on to this day. The preacher is who our people listen to more than ever before. Think about it this way: in the Caucasian churches, especially Christian churches, the deacons tell the preacher what to do. In the African Christian churches, the pastor is the leader of the people. It's just the reverse. And right now, the pastors are being used just as they were with Sylvester. Anyone who tells the truth is ostracized. Anyone who tells the truth is demonized. And anytime that the political community wants the African community to accept something, they send the message through an African preacher. And that guidance has kept us in self-imposed bondage ever since that. And if you look at the Knights of Malta, they were the enforcers for the Catholic Church to make sure that everyone complied with the principles that they had put forth of Christianity, as opposed to the Mayotte principles. The Mayotte principles are the principles that guided our lives. George, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Would you share with us those 4 or 5 basic principles?
Yeah, the 7 principles of the Mayotte Foundation is truth, justice, balance, harmony, order, righteousness, and reciprocity. Those are the 7 principles of the Mayotte early instructions and spiritual instructions and morality.
Thank you. These are the principles that the Pharaoh was charged with upholding and making sure that functionality was possible within the kingdom. Those principles were never adhered to by any European, and to this day they're not being adhered to by Europeans. That is the reason that slave owners could leave church and skin an African alive in front of his children and cut his fingers off and give them to their children as souvenirs and sleep at night and not be bothered by what took place. It's because Europeans did not know what God existed or a God, anything about it, period, and did not know anything about spirituality when they first came in contact with the African. And that same thing continues to this day. We see that today in various ways. And if you want, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. However, I want to stop at this point and ask you if there are questions. Well, let me do this before I actually, if there are questions. Is this making sense to you guys?
Yes.
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 Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Are there any questions?
I don't want to take you off track because you're going somewhere with this. I want to at some point, if you want to wait, I want to talk about our responsibility for learning all of this. Maybe that comes at the end.
Our responsibility for learning this is for the express of what we've been expressing rather for quite some time. If those who are spiritual do not bring a balance into the earth will continue to be in bondage to Europeans. A group of people who are in charge of the whole world, who has no passion for anything except money. Now, am I talking about every individual European? No, I'm not. I'm talking about the overarching systemic way that those who are governing, how they function. They have created a system of control. And that system of control can only be dismantled by those who are seeking the truth, meaning that those who are desiring to be the spiritual beings that we were prior to the invasion of Europeans. That's the reason it's so important. It's not so much about I'm an African and you beneath me. That's not it at all. It's all about bringing balance to humanity as a whole without regard to what you look like or what you have done for that matter. Because regardless of what has been done, we function in this earth as gods, as we have said, Elohim must have forgiveness within us. If we don't forgive, then we are not being true to ourselves, to our being. So
Yeah, that part to me is important. Forgiveness, because we have the power to do so. You look at everybody, and if you isolate Sylvester, or maybe include Sylvester in this as well, who was the priest that took the bribe, the rest of them did it for survival. The rest of them did it, and when I think about it, maybe they were setting the groundwork for us to survive. We've survived for all of these years and made a life for ourselves to where we are at the place in our hearts to do what we're doing now. But I'm talking about all the, especially Africans that are in America, and maybe us looking at what happened then. Has there anybody in the earth that says, you know what, we forgive you, you did what you had to do to survive? All of it is kind of an eye-opener, but I think forgiveness is huge here. And I think it is also open things up even more.
It is. It is huge. And I do agree with you 100% that we must forgive everyone who's involved in this, from Chillemi to the priests who assisted him in doing what he did. Because without forgiveness, we cannot truly embrace the spiritual essence of who we were created to be. So I do agree with that 100%. I want you to also look at, during the time of enslavement, the African preacher was seen as someone who aided and protected the community, assisted in escapes, etc., created codes. So during their preaching, they could talk to the Africans who were in that congregation without the slave owners knowing what they were talking about. And then now we look at it today, we have more preachers today who are working against the African community in terms of keeping us in bondage, based upon being convinced that the government is going to change its tone, and we are going to find equality in the midst of that government. It was not like that during the period of slavery, because we understood that those who are called founding fathers were slaveholders. They cared nothing about us. And they not only killed us, they raped our women, they did whatever they wanted to do. So the preachers during that period knew what was happening. The preachers during this period, the biggest problem with the preachers now during this period is, guess what? Education. When seminary education took everything out of the sense of spirituality, rather, out of the African preacher. And if you look at the seminaries, you will see that there were people like Schofield and Nelson who were very instrumental in establishing these seminaries. And they were for the purpose of making sure that the message that had been contrived was carried out. That's the only difference in a Protestant and a Catholic, is that Catholics confess to a priest and have a confession booth, and the Protestant church doesn't. But as far as theological beliefs, they are exactly the same. And they are based upon. Well, before I go there, let me see if there are any other questions or comments. The education of our preachers, we lost that sense of spirituality, as I said. And now we are in the process of searching for that spirituality, not realizing that it's in us. The reason I'm harping on the preachers so much is because, no different than Sylvester, who was the traitor, who sold out the people in the priesthood in Rome. The preacher, the associational leadership, the National Convention leadership, all of them are the same thing. If you really think about the National Baptist Convention its leader fought Martin Luther King and said he was a troublemaker. And that's why the Progressive National Baptist Convention was organized. So we have always had in our midst this spokesperson for white folks being the leaders, the leading preachers. We've always had that in our midst. And it started with Sylvester in Rome. Any questions or comments about that? Other than those who are teachers or facilitators, please, does this make sense to you? I know there's a lot being said, and I know that you're mulling over in your head, but you will not be able to regurgitate it any more than you're able to regurgitate other things that we've talked about. The question is, does it resonate? If it doesn't, I want to know, because that means we need to continue this discussion in this particular area before we talk about what do we do with Jesus, what do we do with prayer. Does it resonate?
This is Mary. It resonates.
It does.
Thank you. Anybody else? Does it resonate with you?
I just have a comment. Good morning. This is Audrey. And I guess I said a few weeks ago that I've been reading this book by this biblical historian. And if you read some of his accounts of how they actually established the narrative and what it took to, I guess I'm a little overwhelmed and awed by it, because during the Council of Nicaea, they wanted to establish a particular narrative to enforce their own power. And in doing that, they murdered, assassinated, slaughtered anybody else who had a different opinion about what Christianity was and should be. And one particular Pope Damius, he assassinated his way to being the ruler, the Bishop of Rome, because he wanted to be Pope. He wanted to have the power. And then after him, Pope Innocent declared that any doctrine that was different from what they set up in the Council of Nicaea and then the other councils that they had, any doctrine that was different, they ordered all books to be burned so that they could set their narrative in place. So I say this to say, when you realize the history of what actually happened for the Roman Christianity to take over the world, you would just be appalled that that's something that we believe in, or we have believed in. I mean, it is just amazing and appalling to me that all this stuff happened for them to establish the narrative that they wanted and that they wanted to push on the rest of the world.
Audrey, do you think the power of that fear and brutality is what's in our DNA today that still helps solidify that hold on the world, not just America?
Well, I wouldn't say our DNA, but in a lot of people's, yes. Yeah. Yes, indeed, because it's the same kind of thing. Even with people pushing forward the King James Version as the one and only, what's the word? Not one and only canonized version, the true version of the Bible. It's the same kind of thing. It's the same kind of thing exactly. And then they want to berate you or even kill you if you disagree. So yeah, it's the same kind of thing.
Same thing.
And Audrey, that's what happened when the priests in the Kushite kingdom sinned, of course, in Kemet. That's what happened to them when they said that Jesus was Serapis, and they refused to worship an idol. They were murdered.
Yeah.
Because they refused to worship an idol. They were murdered because they said that there was no difference between Jesus and Serapis. The only difference was the name. The arrogance is seen, this bishop in Dublin, Dublin, Ireland. This is what he said. What was it? Bishop James Usher, USSATR, said that, you know what? He woke up one morning and said, the first day of creation was on a Sunday, October 23rd, 4004. There was no explanation. There was no historical anything in it. He just decided that that's what it was. And from that day to this one, that's how time has been counted. I mean, that's why we talk about this 2,000 years between the creation and Moses, and 2,000 between, Moses, and 2,000 between that and Abraham and Jesus.
Yeah, and part of that is because of what they did by declaring the Pope infallible. You know, because then some of the popes would latch on to some of that stuff. And I forget my train of thought, but anyway, when they had the council to determine that the Pope was infallible, I mean, they were meeting, and many of the bishops disagreed with that, but they pushed it through anyway. Pope Innocent pushed it through anyway, and all the bishops that disagreed, he had them murdered. So, and then that established his infallibility. It's just crazy.
Well,
that we believe in that infallibility after he murdered all those people to establish his power.
One of the things that was decreed at that Chalcedon, the council, was no one is permitted to produce or even to write down or compose any other creed or think in any other way other than what the bishops have declared. You can't even think differently than they think. That is mind control. That is true indoctrination, and indoctrination enforced by murder action. But I'm definitely want feedback, and I am going to talk about at some point what do we do with Jesus. But I want the discussion to continue. I want the questions. I want the comments, because I think that it helps all of us.
This is Vermel. I have a question based on what we just discussed, Audrey's point. Are we not having a repeat of our government entities trying to impose their thought process, in particular Trump and white supremacy? Is this
No, we're
not the
not
same
Oh, I'm sorry.
repeat?
No, it's not a repeat at all. It's a continuation.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions or comments?
I mean, it has always worked. Why change the game plan?
Well, right, but guess what? Do you have the capacity to control, to change the game plan? I mean, think about this. This country has this eagle on his dollar bill or on his money. And this eagle has in its talons, it holds an olive branch. And in the left talon, it holds arrows. And it's facing the olive branch. And that symbol says that we desire peace. That's why he's looking at the olive branch. But we are always ready for war. So that to me is a misnomer. So that tells me that we desire peace on our terms. If you don't adhere to peace on our terms, then we are ready to go to war with you. So this is no different than Christianity and the government, and Christianity is no different than the government. All of them are the same. The only place where they are separate is in the minds of Black folks. It's only separate in the minds of the African. Our church is safe. So, well, let me see, questions or comments before I move.
Hey, this is Nick. Yeah, I don't know if this has already been said. I had to step away for a little bit, but whenever Christians talk about being persecuted back in history by the Romans or whatever, like, you know, images of Christians being torn apart by lions and stuff like that, that is the Christian church doing that to the original people who maintained the spiritual traditions that would eventually be abused and deformed into what Christianity became. So it was what Christianity is now, killing people who were more close to the original tradition. So it was them killing them, or it was the churches we think of it today killing the originators of what that became. So there was no Christian persecution that did not come from other people calling themselves that.
So-called Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Rome getting rid of all the people who had a different view of what Christianity was. That's what that was.
Yeah. And just a second comment related to the eagle and the olive branch and the arrows. I remember watching some, it was a Native American person describing that as in terms of the symbolism. What it was obviously symbolic of to them was the subjugation of Native Americans, the arrows, and the subjugation of Black people, or all Black and brown people in the olive branch. And so it's just that clear distinction in the actions of the people who say their symbols mean one thing versus what they do, which is what it actually means. And that is what was taken away from in terms of the symbolism for Native and Black peoples. Thank you.
Thank you. Keep in mind now that the followers of Ptolemy, the Greek, were called Christians too. So Christianity was enforced before there was a Jesus. Would you hold 1 second? Okay. So we cannot lose that. This actually happened. Christians were in this world before there was a Jesus. Christianity was. And Christianity simply means someone who follows Christ. And Christ came from Christos. And Christ was attached to Zeus. So there were Christians before there was a Jesus. Period. Approximately 3,200 years before there was a Jesus. Well, not 3,200, about 1,500 years before there was a Jesus, if not 2,000. Questions or comments? And I want you to understand something. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I do feel some kind of way in saying what I'm saying because it's so ingrained in me. However, I don't have a choice other than to tell the truth. That's it. And if I don't tell the truth, then, as I said yesterday, I am no different than the ones who told a lie in the first place. I am keeping you in a place where you should not be kept, and that is in the dark about what's real. I do believe that because of the signs of the times, that it is imperative for us to understand, to hear this, even if we don't understand it all. Why? Because truth denied shall rise again. The whole idea of killing truth is for the purpose of managing people. Truth is being resurrected now. And this is a truth that's being resurrected that I never thought that I would be talking about. And if the ancestors had not been an enforcer in my life, I've given over to them the guidance of my life. If they had not been in that position with me embracing that, when I made that statement that Jesus never existed, I would not have said that. But I do know that it was necessary for me to say it, to push me to a place where I had to do the research to talk about it. And push me to a place where I talked about it so it would be in the macro. Being in the macro for the express purpose of awakening spirituality in humanity, not just awakening in the Africans who are with us in on this journey, but awakening the spirituality in all Africans for the express purpose of sharing this spirituality with everyone on the earth. Sharing this. Now, you may be dismayed by this, but I want to ask you a question. If the African is the most spiritual being on the earth, then how is it that we are more apt to hold on to the lie of Christianity and Jesus when we are seeing historically what happened what led up to Christianity? How is it that we are wrong as Africans for what we believed hundreds of thousands of years ago, and we did not get the truth until white people put us in bondage? That does not make sense to me. When we know that Christianity was used to justify slavery, so how could we be wrong for hundreds of thousands of years and be the creators that we were in terms of the sciences, all of the sciences, poetry, the philosophy, anything you can name, we did it. How is it that we could be wrong, but the Europeans who murdered us are right? That doesn't make sense to me. We have to stand on the principle of truth, no matter where it leads us and no matter how uncomfortable it makes us. That's just who we are. So what do we do with Jesus? Put him in your pocket? No. No. What do we do with Jesus? We understand the reason that Jesus was brought into existence. And that was for the express purpose of Rome controlling the world. And they made it so that they would be able to control the world by virtue, as Audrey mentioned earlier, of murdering everyone who did not follow their edicts. Even when Martin Luther left and formed the Protestant Church or the Lutheran Church, the principles of Christianity were the same. So nothing changed in that. Jesus is a fictitious image that was given to us for the express purpose of enslavement, of bondage. So what do we do with prayer? We do nothing with prayer. We meditate. Because the word that was translated as prayer speaks to meditation. The priests of old saw the ancestors as being a bridge between us and the universe, a source of wisdom, the wisdom of the universe, the wisdom of the one who created everything that exists. If this were not the case, then why is it that dying and shaking hands with Jesus is more real than the beliefs about the ancestors? I jokingly have said that if you're going to shake hands with Jesus, you're going to have to be in line for all the people who died before you. So you'll never get to shake hands. That makes no sense. Everything is personified. Everything is made a physical person by the European. The African has never made the spiritual beings physical people. Every culture represented. The Native Americans used totem poles as a sacred message. And in those totem poles were animals. And all indigenous people at some point in their life in this earth has used animals as a message, not as a god. The hawk it represents the anointing, and Christianity took and made it a dove, a white dove at that, for that signified Jesus being anointed. That's the same principle that the hawk was used for when it came to Heru, or when it came to the Pharaoh. The robe of the Pharaoh had embroidered in it the hawk for that express purpose of signifying anointing. We have not, in the history of our being, 4 million years on this earth, worship a man, a human being, a physical entity as a God. We've not done that. Even when we were dealing with what we have been taught about the worship of Jesus, we did not believe that it was a man. even went to the place of saying, I remember being in the boys' Sunday school, and I asked the question, why is Jesus white? And I was told that color doesn't matter. And I said, if color doesn't matter, why are you white? I was sent out of Sunday school. I had to go to adult class where my mom was. My grandmama, because they didn't want me in there anymore.
They went and got my daddy. I did the same thing. They went and got my daddy.
Yeah.
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 I have a question.
Sure.
I'll wait.
Go ahead.
So are we regurgitating what Christianity has put in us?
Of course.
Is that why we're exploring or becoming aware, I'll say that, of Kemet?
Yes, we are regurgitators of that. The depth of that, the principles are so deep until you can feel it when you say that Jesus is not real. At least I can anyway. Now it might not.
So I have another question.
It might not have a bearing on like Nick and Janice. But
It still does.
it does. Okay.
It still does.
Yeah. Now think about
So,
that. Wait one moment. Think about that.
okay.
Nick was not exposed to Christianity nowhere near as much as we have. Nowhere near it. And yet this still makes him feel some kind of way. That says to us how strong indoctrination is and the power that hearing something, got you, George, that hearing over and over again, how it brings us, I'm sorry, it entwines, not entwines is not a good word. It weaves a tapestry of lies within us. And I want to talk about the Bible in a moment in conjunction to prayer. But Evelyn, go ahead, and then George.
So when COVID came and everybody started buying toilet paper, remember that? And it was like we all were on the same page. And it's like, and well, my question is, did COVID cause us to eliminate the starting of eliminating Christianity? Because we didn't really go this deep where we are now until after COVID. But do you remember how we all bought toilet paper? And
I did,
to me, that just signified what? Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna tell you why it
done.
happened. Let me tell you why it happened. COVID instilled a sense of lack in people. COVID told people that everything was going to run out and you need to stock up on it. COVID put a fear in people that caused them to be still. And that stillness allowed time to process what was happening around us. It gave us the space to think clearly and to respond as opposed to react to things. Had it not been for COVID, the response to George Floyd's murder never would have been what it was, because everybody was too busy to care. Now, what is the biggest thing about COVID that's being talked about? It's not the millions of lives that was lost, it's how much money was lost and how much money was gained by the billionaires and how much money was lost because of investors. That's the main focal point. When you hear economists talking about the economy in this country, they do it pre-COVID, during COVID, and now that they say after COVID, but it's not true. But anyway, does that make sense, Ellen?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. George.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond in terms of just, what you mentioned in reference to, the church and how we have come to verbally every Sunday, we come and we go through the Lord's Prayer and we have the affirmation of faith. And, when you spoke in terms of the Catholic Church, how that particular Apostle Creed talks about, I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, and that's something that every Sunday, it was a point to memorize, it was a point to affirm that. And I think this is where, that influence of the, Catholicism, has, I guess, been so deeply enrooted that now, as we talk about it, today in terms of our affirmations, why it's important that we, appreciate being loose from that particular mindset, if that resonates. I'm done.
Yes, it does resonate. We have been the Manchurian candidate for Christianity. The Manchurian candidate was indoctrinated to the point where when the certain words were mentioned, the response was in keeping with what I think it was North Korea that this was based on, told them to respond. That's what Christianity did to us. When someone attacked Christianity, or when someone doubted that was the God of Jesus lived, when somebody spoke, then we immediately became defensive about Christianity. Now, question, comments, because I want to talk about this Bible and Jesus thing, okay? Jesus, what am I saying to you about Jesus? Now that it's been laid out for you, not just by me, but by us. Now that it is there, the question is, what are you going to do about Jesus? I have no problem with what you choose to do. It doesn't bother me. Why? Because you have freedom of choice. If you choose to continue to embrace that, that's between you and the Creator. If you choose not to, then you will be illuminated. You will begin to see more than you've ever seen before spiritually. However, I do not condemn you for either choice you make, but I do believe that you were obligated to hear the truth. We were obligated to give you the truth. Now, what you do with that truth is no different than what you have done with the other portions of truth that we have given to you earlier. I am not upset by what you choose. I really am not. I just want you to see the truth.
Well, that brings me to one of the questions, Pastor. Somebody asked me, while you're around your family members or whatever, and you're asked to pray, I guess that's something that will make us all a little uncomfortable. How do you address that?
You can verbally pray without including Christianity. Because when you raise who is Ra? Ra is no different than saying Father. So it doesn't matter, is what I'm saying. You don't have to mention Jesus. If you choose to do that, it's okay. It is no different than our parents before seminaries. Our parents talked about Jesus and how Jesus delivered us. It was because of their sincerity. The Creator knew what they meant. The Creator knew that they were speaking from the depth of their hearts. They did not give us Christianity to enslave us or to keep us in bondage. They gave us Christianity to protect us from going to hell. They did not understand, had not had opportunity to see what we are being shown. It's okay. I have no issues with that. I cannot sit here and say that everybody went to hell who worship Jesus. I can't say that because it's not true. It's just not true. But I do know a man. I knew Carlton Pearson quite very well. And Carlton Pearson said that he could not believe that a gracious God, a merciful God, would send all the people to hell simply because they had not heard of Jesus. And 6,000 people walked out of his church. And his church was shut down because of the likes of Kenneth Hagin and the folk from Oral Roberts. All those folks, Oral Roberts talked to him and asked him to recant, and he refused to do it. And in less than 6 months, his church was gone. So who were they worshiping? Who were they trusting? You are our pastor, but our God is Oral Roberts and Kenneth Hagin. They said that you were wrong, therefore you're wrong. So what you do with Jesus is up to you. What do you do with the Bible? How do we deal with the Bible now? In 451 to 1500, roughly, there was that was known as the Dark Ages. During that period of time, the scrolls, the sacred writings from Kemet, were in different places. When the Catholics, when they started killing people because they refused to follow Serapis or Jesus, both being the same, they began to hide sacred writings in different places, in caves. And some were still in a building in Kemet, Egypt. And they acquired those scrolls. They took them. And during that course, they manipulated them. During the course between 451 and 1455, they manipulated those writings. That is the reason that they will not allow anyone to read the original scrolls. That's why they're kept in the dungeon in Rome, at the Vatican. That's the reason that the majority of the sacred writings that were kept in Kemet in the Great Library were burned to hide the truth. The Bible consists of truth, but it also consists of lies. The Bible has truth in it because it was copied. What they did, instead of talking about the spiritual being drawn out, they talked about Moses leading the people out of Egypt. Well, that's not what we believe as Africans. What we believe is that we are Moses, meaning Moses means to draw out. And we have the obligation to separate ourselves from those cramped spaces that makes us irritable, uncomfortable, angry, all those things. And we are during that period, we are in a wilderness of change. And we can choose to remain in the wilderness and bondage and die there, or we can make the decision to move beyond that. And moving beyond that, which is called the land of milk and honey, moving beyond that is speaking of moving to a righteous space where everything is provided. When we do that, we are then understanding the true essence of what is being said there, as opposed to some man named Moses. That's how it has been manipulated. We have a choice. Baptism was in place in Kemet long before there was anything about a Jesus. Baptism in Egypt was for the purpose of you being a part of the religious community, which means that everyone in Kemet was baptized. And that baptism led to the teachings of Ma'at. And once that was done, it led to the teachings of science and poetry and literature, all of that. So the baptism was brought from Kemet to Rome. And if you notice it, the baptism in the Catholic Church is different than the baptism in Rome. It was no sprinkling, it was immersion. And the truth of it was attributed to Jesus. It was a symbolic means of separating you, or saying that you want to be separated from all of those things that were antithetical to the principles of Ma'at. That brought you into the community. That's the reason that men, women were killed, because they refused to baptize Alexander. They refused to baptize Ptolemy. They were killed because Ptolemy knew you could not be accepted in the religious community if you were not baptized. He knew that. Otherwise, why would he kill people to try to force them to baptize him? Why was it so important for Constantine to get baptized? That lie about Constantine being baptized on his deathbed, that's a lie. That never existed. Constantine was baptized because Constantine wanted to be accepted in the community of the priesthood, not in Rome, but in Egypt. That's where it came from. For the express purpose of controlling people of color. When the Greeks came into Egypt, there was no such thing as Greece. There was just a group of barbarians who came in and slaughtered people. They didn't even have a country. They definitely didn't have the ability to write and to read. None of them could read and write. The same thing with Romans. They could not read and write. So what they did, everything to emulate and manipulate what was taking place in the Kushite kingdom and to hide it from us. All of that's in the Bible. So what do you do with the Bible? Learn how to separate the wheat from the chaff. You cannot do that if you are not, if your desire to be spiritual is not the priority in your life. You cannot do that if the priority in your life is not truth, the desire for truth. When you desire truth with all your being, it's at that point that you begin to see things for what they are. You begin to understand the words that you've been reading in the Bible and applying the different meaning to them. Now you begin to understand the true meaning of them. And in the true meaning of them, as we talk about what it is, resonates deeply than what we were told it was. The understanding that I talked about Moses makes more sense, resonates deeper than what we were told that there were slaves in Egypt. There's no history of that any place. There's no mention of that any place in history. It's only in the Bible because they used the cramped space. They translated what was a cramped space into Egypt. That's it. It's the translations. It is the writings that went forth from 451 until 1455. Why 1455? I think it's 1444, 55, whatever. Why that long? Why am I talking about that? Because that was the year that the Ginsburg Bible was printed. Ginsburg is the one who invented the printer. Said to invent it anyway. We don't know how that works. But anyway, he was a German. And he printed the Ginsburg Bible. Why did they allow that Bible to be printed? Because everything that they had manipulated was in that Bible. This BS about some books falling on the floor at the Nicene Council, none of that happened. None of that happened. It took them, some say from 451 to 444, and others say to 1500. Why? Because that's when the first Bible was printed in 14 whatever. And 1500 is when it began to be distributed throughout Europe and used in places where there were people of color to force them to capitulate to what the doctrines, what they said the doctrines were. So what do we do with the Bible? We keep it. We read it. We discern. We embrace it. I cannot embrace Jesus. I cannot embrace Jesus because that's the rapists. And my ancestors, your ancestors, did not pray to or worship objects. They worship the light, the creator of all. That's where we are. That is a message that our young people are receiving from the universe. That is the reason that they talk about being spiritual and not being religious. That is the reason that you don't find them on the pews in churches. Because a message is being received by them. And that message that they are receiving is saying to them that they are spiritual and should not be manipulated by a group of people who do not have their best interests at heart. Questions or comments? Is this clear?
It is.
It's clear. But one thing I wanted to ask though is what about the other gospels that are not part of the canon, like the Gospel of Thomas Gospel of Mary, all of those.
Take Thomas' name off of it. Take Mary's name off and try to read it. Those were hidden and print, a robe printed those. Have they been manipulated? In some cases, yes, but not to the point where they don't care to spill the truth about it. They inserted names, proper names, but there were no proper names attributed to, no proper names rather, that were attributed to the writings, the sacred writings.
Mhm.
The sacred writings were, for lack of a better way of expressing it, were signed by the priesthood, not by a Sylvester's names being on it, but by the Memphis priesthood, the Memphite priesthood. That's how they were. That's how the writings were. They did not have individual names about who wrote them. Think about this. Who wrote the philosophy that Aristotle espouses? We don't know the name, because in Kemet, it didn't matter, because we are one community. The only thing that mattered is that we function in harmony. Right now, it doesn't matter to me how the truth gets to other people, as long as it get there. You don't have, matter of fact, I told the people in my class, you don't have to say that I said anything. Just speak it or raise a question about it. Why did I do that? Because it doesn't matter to me whether it's attributed to me or not. I'm like this guy, Turnell Nelson, I met years ago, or we met years ago from Trinidad. His when he spoke, when he taught, he says the only copyright that I have is that you make sure that you copy it right. That's how I feel. Freely I receive, freely I give. That's the attitude of all of us who present to you day in, day out. Those who make every effort to bring the truth to you. And we'll challenge each other if it presents itself. That's who we are. Questions or comments?
And I back you
comment
up.
I have.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Okay, the comment I have is that remember when we were when the teachers were in there, were studying and were talking, and there were some things that just did not fit, it just did not resonate within us, and we said, and we discounted it. As it relates to the Bible, now that we know the truth of where some of those stories came from, and we could compare the story with what we know as the truth and the basic principle of morality that was given to us thousands of years ago. That helps us discern what is truth and what is not. And so for me, there's a story. If there's a story, then I can ask the question, well, did the Creator really say kill every single person, woman, man, and child, and animal? Did the Creator really say that genocide was okay? Those are the questions I have, because those are the basic things that the authoritarians are now using, particularly Zionists, that, this is our land, et cetera. And I use my chariot, just like Elijah used his chariot in the Bible. My chariot is a tank. kind of thing. Those are the kinds of things that help us cut and divide and slice the truth from that which is untrue. So I would say, yeah, you know, you can appreciate the story, but understand that there's a story beneath the story. And the story beneath the story has the truth in it. It has more of the truth in it than that which is presented as the story, if that resonates.
It does. That brought some to memory. When the Catholic Church said that Peter was the first bishop of Rome, the first vicar of Rome, guess who they changed from that? It was Sylvester, the African, who became Peter. Every name associated was Anglicized. So no different than our name was changed. Our names were changed because even to this day, they say you have a heathen name. You got to have a Christian name. And your Christian name is John. Your Christian name is Alfred, that kind of stuff. In other words, your Christian name has to be a name that Europeans have. We are so enamored with America, with England, with Europe, until we don't even question what is told to us. I mean, how long have you believed that Europe was a continent? How can you sit in the classroom and teach me a bald-faced lie and convince me of that? Because of what was written at the Chalcedon Council, you will not think anything other than what we teach you. That's the basis of it. Anyone, you can look at your globe right now, your map, put it up on your phone. You will see that Europe is not a continent. It's attached to Asia, and they did not want any connections with people who did not look like them. They did the same thing with the Bible. There is no record anywhere of Africans murdering people because of God told them to do it. There is no record of African people killing people simply because they don't believe what they believe in terms of Christianity. Every conflict on the continent of Africa was brought in by Christianity. Every single conflict, you will find Christians or Muslims engaged in that conflict because both are European mindsets. Let me say this, and let me say this to you. Africa, the proper name for Africa is Akabalon. The Greeks changed it. Africa. I don't know whether they changed it because they couldn't pronounce it. They could pronounce nothing else. Like, you know, the hill of Ptah, Haku Ptah. They could not pronounce that. They became Egypt. But anyway, that's a story for another day. They changed it to Africa, the land of the blacks. Why did they not keep the name Akabalon when they knew that was the name Akabalon? Somebody, do you remember what Akabalon means? That's not rhetorical.
Garden of Eden or birthplace of mankind, something like that.
Yeah, the Garden of Life, yes. if it's a Kabylon, our minds immediately go to the beginning of humanity in this earth into Southeastern Africa. But that's not what you're talking about. The whole continent of Africa is a Kabylon. The reason they cannot find the Garden of Eden is because they are robbing the Garden of Eden. The whole continent is the Garden of Eden, is the Garden of Life itself. If you take everything that is being taken from Africa, and if you build a fence around it and you cannot get anything out of Africa, this world would die. It is 100% dependent on Africa. So Kabylon is the source of life for humanity, whether they are stealing in order to be enriched, or whether they are simply simply making every effort to indoctrinate people in Africa. All is a Kabylon, is life. And with us embracing what we have learned and are learning, we have opportunity to free a Kabylon from the barbarians, not just Europeans, but the Chinese too. The Chinese are more entrenched in Africa than Europeans are now. And the Chinese says that what they are doing, they are sending male prisoners to Africa. And when male prisoner is impregnating African women, and that child that is birthed is considered a Chinese citizen. That may sound benign on the surface, but if that child is considered a citizen of China, that gives China justification for going to war with any nation that it feels like is threatening its citizens. They are doing the same things that Europeans did and still are doing. I'm done. Unless there are questions or
I
comments.
have a question.
Go
I
ahead.
have a question. So is a Kabylon the soul, a representation of the soul, or is it the soul?
A Kabylon is representative of life. Physical life, the manifested life. You are your body is a manifestation of life. It is a symbol of life. Does that make sense to you?
It does, but I see it as the soul.
I don't want to get into that right now. The soul.
Okay.
Because we have been so messed up by Christianity when it comes to a soul. We as teachers are going to come together and discuss the nature of the soul based upon what we have seen in a sin in Kemet. You good with that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir, I am. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I honestly, huh?
I had a question. Someone sent me a question about Cleopatra. Was she you want to deal with this now? You rather hold on to it?
I'm trying to weigh whether it's not going to generate a whole discussion. I think we've given enough for today.
Okay.
Because like, I don't want to overwhelm. And that's why I tried to go over brief the things that we talked about yesterday. This is an embracing opportunity, rather, to embrace what was in the beginning. It's not about destroying anybody's religion or beliefs. It's about exposing the truth. And what you do with the truth is up to you. No one will be judged by what you choose to do. I'm done.
Thank you, sir.
Pastor, I have a question that we can actually talk about tomorrow. When we now look at the entity that was created and called Jesus, where does that leave the 12 disciples? And that's something I would like for you to maybe address tomorrow.
Okay. I'll
You
do
gonna
that.
remember that, Pastor?
I ain't gonna remember that. She is.
Yes, I will remember.
Okay. All right. Good question, Kathy. Good discussion, y'all. Y'all. Again, write down your questions if you have any you don't want to sit over the air and send them to one of the teachers or pastor, and we'll be happy to talk about it. Okay.
All right.
Ron,
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
can you just tell us what the question is so we can be thinking about it?
Well, the question was, is Cleopatra related to Ptolemy?
To see,
Hmm.
was she African? Is that what's
And was she African? Yes. So that was the question.
Okay.
Okay. And don't forget the question I mentioned yesterday, maybe we'll get to tomorrow. Mary, not someone had a question about Revelations 12.
Oh, Angela.
Angela, I'm sorry, Angela, but maybe we can get to all of those tomorrow. Okay.
Okay. Tomorrow will probably be a Q&A. That would be good. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
All right. Guys, have a great day. Don't know what it's doing where you are, but it's raining here. Thanks for your presence, your discussion, your questions, your answers, your everything. I appreciate it.
Take care, family.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.